Hey guys, welcome to our first lesson together. This lesson we're going to be concentrating on the flavour of intervals. Alright, so now that we understand the idea of intervals and how numbers relate to the alphabetical system, let's actually listen to what these intervals feel like. Now before we begin, I want to make something very clear. This is subjective. If you hear something different to me, that's completely okay. We're all looking at the same thing from different angles. I'm simply sharing what I personally hear and what many musicians generally associate emotionally with these sounds. So if you're new to this concept, I recommend starting in the key of C. So C is going to be number 1 on our easy key. It's our home note. And today we're going to be using something called the chromatic scale. Chromatic simply means all the colours, every note, every emotional shade. So here's our map. C is 1, D flat is flat 2, D is 2, E flat is flat 3, E is 3, F is 4, G flat is flat 5, G is 5, A flat is flat 6, A is 6, B flat is flat 7, and B is 7. And then we begin again at 1 again. Okay, so now personally I prefer using flats instead of sharps here because it keeps everything visually simple. So if you were wondering why are they all flats and not sharps, now you know why. So now let's talk about the emotional categories. I personally hear intervals in 3 main flavours. Those are relaxed notes, tense notes, and very tense notes. The relaxed notes are 1, 3, flat 3, and 5. The tense notes are 2, 4, 6, and flat 7. And the very tense notes are flat 2, flat 5, flat 6, and 7. Now I like to think of these almost like food flavours. The relaxed notes are like milk. They're cool, stable, comforting, like arriving home after a hard day. The tense notes are a little bit more like ginger. They have movement. They have a little bit of a kick. And the really tense notes are like chili. They're hot, unstable, and they demand an answer. So music is constantly moving between these emotional states: relaxation, movement, tension, and then resolution, which is returning to a relaxed note. So let's hear them first with number 1. This is what I like to call home. It's pure awareness, stillness, and balance. This is the center of gravity in music. Everything wants to return here. If you've ever heard monks chanting Om, that deep grounding drone-like feeling is similar to this. Oh, that's my terrible impersonation of some Tibetan monks. Now let's move on to the perfect fifth, 1 and 5. This is one of the strongest sounds in music. If 1 is awareness, 5 feels like the body. It's grounded, physical, and stable. This is the famous power chord in rock music. It's also the drone you hear in Indian classical music. It's very calming, very open. Now let's move on to the major third. This is happiness, brightness, warmth. All major chords contain this interval. And that's why major chords sound uplifting. Now let's move on to the flattened third. Immediately the colour changes. This is sadness, reflection, longing. This is why minor chords sound emotional and melancholy. Now let's move on to a major second. This is tension, movement. I often think of this as a warning tone. You hear this type of interval in emergency sirens all the time. Now the perfect fourth. This one feels majestic to me, like anticipation, like a sunset right before the sun disappears. And if I resolve it down to the third, you hear the emotional release. Now the major sixth. This has a very bright, wholesome sound. It's very common in soul music, blues and R&B, almost childlike, optimistic. And yeah, you hear it a lot in, like blues riffs going from the 1 and the 5 up to the 6th. It's probably one of the first things that most guitarists learned. Now flat 7. This one is funky. It's elastic sounding. Bass players absolutely love this interval. There's a bounce to it. It's a kind of dance-like movement. Now let's move on to the really tense intervals. Let's start with a flattened second. Immediately uncomfortable. It's dark, mysterious, classic horror movie territory. You hear this sound also a lot in flamenco music and also Middle Eastern music. Now the flat 5. This is the famous tritone, also known as the devil's interval. It's very unstable, very dramatic. It's actually constantly used in blues, jazz and heavy music. And I'll give you an example of a blues scale and you'll hear it immediately. It's a very cool sounding note, also known as the blues note. Now the flat 6. This one feels mysterious, dark, almost cinematic, very spy movie sounding. And finally the major 7th. This note desperately wants to return home. It's hanging right on the edge, and when we finally resolve it, we return to 1. There's a release. So if I play a major scale, you'll hear it. When I get to 7, I'll stop there. And it finally releases. So at this point, I highly recommend that you sit with your instrument and begin exploring these intervals yourself. Start with 1, and then just add one other note. And simply play them back and forward, and really listen to them. Notice how your nervous system reacts. Notice the emotional colours. And if your experience differs to mine, that's perfectly okay. That means you're beginning to develop your own relationship with sound. And honestly, that's where music starts becoming something much deeper than information. It actually becomes lived experience. So thanks for hanging out with me today, and I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. See you soon.